Hello, students. So in this lecture, we're going to discuss culture, and we're going to specifically look at the culture of higher education, the culture of colleges and universities. And we're actually going to talk about the expectations that your professors and all of the support staff at the college have for you as a college student. We're also going to look at the attitudes and the behaviors that we expect you to have as college students, and also the attitudes and the behaviors that you should avoid at absolutely all costs. So to talk about college culture, we need to start off with a conversation just about culture. And normally when we have a conversation about culture, you'd imagine maybe we're in a social science class, like I'm a geographer, so in a geography class, or in a sociology or an anthropology class, and so forth. So I want to ask you, if you were in one of those social science classes, how would those disciplines go about defining the term culture? Some of you might say, well, culture is my heritage, it's my nationality, it's my ethnicity, it's my ancestry. Others of you might talk about the languages that you speak, the religions that you practice. Some people might talk about the way that we dress, or the music we listen to, or the art that we produce. You might also mention some of the customs and traditions that we have in our cultures. So all of these things that we just described are aspects of culture, and they're actually specifically called material culture. Sometimes we call them surface culture because they're on the surface. And these are things that are very visible and obvious, apparent, and they're not just visible to and apparent to the people who practice the culture, but they're also apparent to outsiders. So if you were to visit, for example, a foreign country, and you were to, walk around your first day in that country, you would start noticing elements of the surface culture. People speak different languages, they dress differently, they're practicing different customs. So please keep in mind that when we talk about material culture, we're talking about things that can be perceived with our five senses. And when you look at the cultural iceberg that I have on the right, you'll see on the iceberg that the surface culture is the part of the iceberg that is indeed on the surface of the water. It's visible, it's apparent, it's obvious. But we also know that that's not all there is to culture. When we start diving a little deeper, we start noticing that there's other things to culture. There's values and beliefs and attitudes. There's all sorts of sociological terms like folkways and mores and norms, right? Taboos of a group of people. And we call these aspects of culture non-material culture. We call it deep culture. And this is the part of culture that isn't as visible, hidden, you could say invisible. It's very subtle, but it is so deeply entrenched in the people who practice that culture. So when we look at the cultural iceberg again, when you're coming up in the water, you're on a ship, you're on a boat, and you're coming up, not too close to an iceberg, but you're coming up on an iceberg, you don't necessarily see what's below the surface. But in fact, it is a part of the iceberg. It is the iceberg, and it's the driving force of the iceberg. So this is exactly what culture is. It is the collection of the material and the non-material aspects. It's the surface and the deep. And it's passed from one generation to a next by a group of people. So culture really is a form of programming, and that's an interesting way to think about it, but it is, because it keeps our society or a group of people, it keeps everything running smoothly. It basically is telling us when we're making choices that, one choice is right, another's wrong, or something's normal or not normal, or it's a good choice or a bad choice. And basically this programming pushes us to behave in a culturally approved way. So whatever cultures you're a part of, you're usually doing things kind of automatically because you are culturally programmed to behave in that culturally approved manner. So you get along with society, right? And so when someone from a particular culture, is behaving in that culture, they normally take things pretty for granted until somebody breaks or somebody disobeys one of the rules for that culture. And as you can see on the screen, I have a word. It's called folkways, and this is a word from, social sciences, from sociology. We're not going to cover all the definitions in sociology when we talk about culture, but I do want to talk about folkways. They're very interesting, and they're basically the unwritten rules rules of society. And when someone breaks a folkway, everybody in that culture knows it. People have a reaction. It's usually a negative one. And then there are consequences. And the consequences sometimes are, mild, fairly mild, but they can be extremely, severe and extreme. So I'm going to share some examples with you in the United States, in the Western world, about some very basic folkways. And, the consequences in these cases are fairly minor, but keep in mind folkways, if they're broken, can be quite severe. So the first one that I have for you, there you see Metallica. So I just want you to imagine that you, whatever your favorite musical artist is, whatever your favorite band is, I'm a fan of Metallica. Let's say you are waiting for concert tickets. It's the ultimate show, right? The last time they're performing or something. And you have been waiting in line outside for, 2 or 3 days in this enormous line to get concert tickets. It's cold, it's wet, obviously don't have a bed to sleep in. Where do you go to use the restroom? You're just waiting in line. And they're getting ready to start, the line's starting to move, and a big group of people just cuts right in front of you. Well, pardon my French, but there is going to be some hell to pay, because it is an unwritten rule that you don't cut in line when others have been waiting. And in this case, there might actually be a riot or a fight or something breaking out because you just broke a folkway. Another example, and here you see on the screen, here is a couple, a romantic couple, a 16-year-old boy and girl, young woman, young man, and they're getting ready to go on their first date, and the young man comes to pick up his girlfriend, and what he does is he gets to kind of the driveway or the mailbox or the street, and he honks the horn for the girl to come out. Mom and Dad are not going to be happy, and that date probably isn't going to win any points with Mom and Dad, because that young boy just completely broke a folkway, disrespecting the family and the honor of the young lady. So definitely not a thing to do. And the last one that I have for you is something that we all see all the time, and we either do it or it happens to us, and that is somebody goes through a door and they see somebody kind of close behind, and they hold the door open for them, as you see the young boy doing for the other boy. And what are you supposed to do? What is the unwritten rule when you go through that door after somebody has held it for you? And the answer is you acknowledge them. You say thank you so much. You make a little bit of small talk, but you acknowledge that other person's effort and existence. But what happens when somebody doesn't and they just walk through the door? What do we think? Yeah, how rude. We might even mutter something under our breath that puts us in a bad mood. We kind of give them the side eye, right? Because they just broke a folkway. So the consequences vary, of course, depending on the rule that you're breaking and what culture you're from. But nonetheless, you are going against the culture, and that is not cool, because you are in that culture and you're supposed to behave in a culturally programmed way. So, of course, each of us belongs to a culture, and in fact, we all belong to many cultures. We belong to many subcultures. And right now, one of the cultures that everyone in this class belongs to is the culture of higher education. We are all college and university students. And of course, the culture of college is unique. And you can't say that the culture of college and the culture of school in general, like K through 12, is the same. It isn't at all. They are totally different cultures for everyone involved. Sometimes people say teachers and professors are the same, do the same thing. Nope. We are part of two completely different cultures. Sometimes people say, well, school is school, right? Students in K through 12, students in college, it's the same culture. It is a totally different story, guys. But you can see the problem, right? So students from the K-12 arena arrive at a college thinking school is school, that the culture of high school is the same as the college one. And it isn't. It isn't by a long shot. So students end up behaving in this way that it's accepted or at least tolerated in high school. But when they get to the college environment, you know what? You're offending college professors. You're offending college staff. You're offending the whole process. You're disrespecting it. You're going against the rules, whether they're written or unwritten, of the college practices. The thing, though, is really, guys, students are usually doing this unknowingly. They're not doing it intentionally. But the thing is, the consequences are there regardless, whether it's intentional or unintentional. Consequences for grades, for learning, for making connections with other students, for building relationships with faculty and staff, and also just for your future in the world of your career and in the world of professionalism. On this slide, we're going to look at some of the differences, we could say, between school, but high school and college. And there are so many differences, guys, and it really boils down to the difference between taking responsibility and being mature versus kind of being immature. And this is a list of differences, and we're just going to kind of go through the list, but they're way more than just this. See if you can come up with any other differences between the two. But one of the basic differences is that, K through 12 education is the law. But college is a choice. You don't have to go to college. You're going because you want to for whatever reasons. It's a personal choice, and it's a gift. It's an opportunity that not everybody in the world gets to have, obviously. Another difference between the two, of course, is who is accountable. Now, in public schools, I don't want to say public schools, but in K through 12 education, I should say, pretty much the responsibility falls on teachers. There's a lot of pressure on our teachers out there in the United States and in the world. It's constantly reminders to the students. The bulk of the pressure is on the teachers, not necessarily on the students, but in college, it's all the accountability falls on, the student. Another difference between the two is when it comes to actual behaviors in the classroom or in the online environment. In K through 12 education, man, public schools put up with a lot of stuff, okay? I wouldn't necessarily say they're tolerant of it, but they spend a lot of time in this process of disciplining and student referrals and all of this, and kind of takes away from actually the whole learning process. In college, there's basically zero tolerance. A professor at any moment can kick you out of a class for inappropriate behaviors. You can actually get barred from a school. There's a whole student code of conduct that we have to follow, and there's just zero tolerance for any kind of immaturity. Another difference, you guys already watched my video about study time ratios and time spent in class, but this is a big wake-up call for a lot of students who enter college, and that is when you're in K through 12, most of your week is spent in school and very little time spent processing the information yourself outside of class. So fairly little homework, fairly little studying. But the opposite is true in college. If you actually do the math, you are spending very few hours in either your traditional or your online classes. The bulk of your time should be spent studying, doing homework, writing essays, processing things. So completely opposite there. Another difference, who is the manager of the time? In K through 12, it's everybody but the student, and in college, it's all on the student. It's an amazing skill set to develop in college, but some students struggle with it quite a bit because they're coming from the high school or the public school mentality. Another difference is how instruction takes place. So for K through 12 education, teachers are really held to a very particular detailed structure that's mandated by depending on the state, depending on different kind of core curriculum. And sometimes teachers, in fact, have to teach to the test, the standardized test, which is really unfortunate. But in colleges, while we do have outcomes and certain things that we have to meet by our own coordinating boards, we have a tremendous amount of academic freedom, which is why professors a lot of times like going into the field, because how we teach, what we teach, how we go about it is based on our own interests and our own teaching styles, for example. Another difference, K through 12, sometimes the standards are high, but a lot of times very low standards versus high standards in college. When it comes to support systems, right, of course both support systems have family and friends, but in college there's way more of a reliance on the student and to reach out to support services at the college. When it comes to choices, big difference. In college, there's so many more choices about what you're majoring in and also what you're going to be doing in terms of the actual coursework. In terms of distractions, what's another difference? Parents and teachers manage the distractions or the student manages it. Who's paying for it? In both cases, the taxpayers may be if you're on financial aid, but a lot of times in college, students are footing the bill themselves. And of course, the biggest, which is there more choices in college for sure.